The revolution is lit.
Hello, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Ishatella. My name is Akile Anayi, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. These studies are important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, the chairman continues reading from Vanguard Up, Unity of Theory and Practice, the political report to the first Seventh Congress Plenary of the African People's Socialist Party, starting on page 20. For the first hour, Chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we will open it up for you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Ishatella. Recruit Chairman.
Uhuru, Comrade Director, Akile and I'd like to, first of all, just thank you for the introduction and to welcome all of you to this discussion that we're having on today. As Comrade Akile has just mentioned, we will be taking today's study from the political report to the plenary of 2020, the title of which was Vanguard Up, and with the tagline, Unity of Theory and Practice, which is critical and is part of what shapes and defines who we are as a political organization and how we do represent a continuum, a part of a revolutionary historical continuum of our people for freedom and liberation. And consistent with that, I just really want to just express appreciation to members of our party and movement stretch across the globe. I know there are different levels of development and experience within our party and movement. I know, for example, the really important work that's being done in Bermuda and Guadeloupe and in the Caribbean, which in both instances represent a relatively new component of our party work. I know that in places like Chad, Uganda, Tanzania, Mali, among other places, relatively new parts of the process of our movement, but we are spreading throughout the world. And incredibly important work is occurring in all of the places we just mentioned. And what is called South Africa, occupied Azania, we are on the ground in a very serious way, and we have been. With extraordinarily diligent and passionate African internationalists who are on the ground in both forms, in both the form directly of the African People's Socialist Party, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, I said both, but also the African National Women's Organization are all present and struggling and involved in the activity on the ground. And again, what's really important is we're looking at the unity of both theory and practice, that an idea of theory that cannot be implemented, that is never tested in terms of practice, is almost meaningless. And I want to also just say that I'm really profoundly impressed with the work that our party has done through the Uhuru Solidarity Movement in at least 6 cities throughout the United States on yesterday, with the march in solidarity reparations for African people. Marches happened in San Diego, California, and in Philadelphia, and in Portland, Oregon, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Louis, and in Minneapolis, Minnesota. These are really important mobilizations, pushing the question of reparations. Again, these are not just ideas for us. These are not just purely abstract questions that we're addressing and hoping that one day the white man or the ruling class will become so beneficent that they'll through some of these institutions, that they'll begin granting reparations to our people. We have come to understand that reparations is something that has to be fought for, and that we have to do it now. And that particularly during this era of imperialist crisis, that we have a responsibility and an opportunity to push the reparations issue, and not to rely on the government or to rely on any of the institutions of the bourgeoisie to make it happen, but to rely on actions and activity by masses of people. And that include corporations who need to be pushed, regardless of what a Congress will do, has done, regardless of what a local government will do, has done. For example, in California, some reparations motion has occurred coming from the office of the governor. Well, that's all well and good, but in San Diego, the Uhuru Solidarity movement was marching in the streets, demanding action around this question, demanding reparations, and not just calling on the corporations, but giving white people in general an opportunity to make a self-criticism to Africans and other peoples around the world who are exploited, and who by this government and by this economy, and also by certain participation by white people in general, who benefit from the oppression and exploitation of Africans and peoples around the world. We answered that question before, when we've heard certain white people who would say that that I had nothing to do with it. I never engaged in slavery or anything to that effect. And that's not even necessarily, that's not the only thing that we're addressing, the question of slavery. But the thing that we have to say is that we didn't have anything to do with it either. We didn't make it happen. But what has occurred is that white people in general have benefited, have inherited the legacy of slavery. And for white people, which has been wealth and value that comes at the expense of African people. We have inherited the poverty, and you have inherited the well-being that has come to be recognized as something that is due white people and due to America at large. So I just want to say that I think that this fitting that we should be grappling with this issue, or pushing this issue, revolving around the unity of theory and practice, that theory without practice is meaningless, and practice without theory is blind. And we have a responsibility, and that's what we saw happening on yesterday, when the party, through the Solidarity movement, was able to intervene in the spontaneous activity occurring by peoples throughout this country, pushing a revolutionary line. It's not just an empty protest. As angry as people may be, as upset as people may be, as dissatisfied as people may be, protest alone is not necessarily helpful by itself, because the issue is that even our oppressors will get in front of the protests and then will say, this is what we are fighting for, when it has nothing, means nothing in terms of advancing the struggle. And especially since all of this motion throughout the United States that we see happening spontaneously stems from the obvious brutal police colonial terror that's waged against African people in this country, then there needs to be a coherent response to that, that not only satisfies some kind of emotional need by the colonizer, or emotional need by those of us who are colonized, but actually says which way forward, what is it that we have to do? And so that's why this reparations mobilization, putting out in front, reparations is what we are fighting for. Black community control of the police is what we are fighting for. And to make this a part of the coherent message, down with colonialism. We are opposed to colonialism, making this a part of the narrative that has to be imposed on the growing resistance. It doesn't mean that we have to be every place. I just spoke to 6 cities that the Uhuru Solidarity movement was involved in. There are other cities that the party is involved involved in this country and other places around the world, in Europe, what have you. So the message what has to occur is that we have to be there even when we are not there. That's why it's so significant that we see more and more, we hear more and more people when they're addressing the question of African people in this country are having to say colonialism, colonialism, colonialism. That didn't happen by accident. That's a part of the struggle that we've been waging now since the 1970s. Push it, push it, push it. And not just push it as an abstract issue, but push it also because it is a contest that we are waging against those who will tell us that our struggle is against colonial racism, which doesn't tell us anything except that we are trying to make white people like us, and it doesn't affect, excuse me, it doesn't affect the relations of power that exist between Africans, the oppressed, and white people, the oppressor, or the US government itself and African people. So political line and theory are critical things that we have to deal with and that we have to understand that this is not just some kind of empty discussion that we're involved in. So it's important to say that. Secondly, in relationship to that and why we would continue exploring the political reports to our various Congresses and the documents that sum up who we are and where it is that we have to go. The thing is that we have to recognize that we are part of a revolutionary continuum that African people around the world have been struggling for a while now, and that we have to have some kind of direction to where we're going, and that we have to be able to sum up where we are at any given moment in history, because history does not stand still. And the circumstances that we have to deal with at any given moment may have shifted from circumstances of the last time, but we have to be able to move our way forward through this process. And of course, central to that is having a cohesive, coherent philosophy that guides everything we do, that all of our actions are tethered. All of our actions, everything we do is informed by a revolutionary theory, a scientific revolutionary theory, African internationalism. This is the thing that keeps us further away from the possibilities of opportunism, which is to sacrifice the long-term aims of what the people need, what the masses need for short-term interests of the petty bourgeoisie or the bourgeoisie itself. So we have to know what it is we're fighting for. If we got a grip on that, then we can figure out tactics and strategies and things like that in order to accomplish it. But we must firmly have a grip on the philosophy that is informing what our struggle is about. So it has to be tethered. And what the African People's Socialist Party, our existence, is testimony to the fact that we believe and we understand that there is not going to be any freedom for African people as long as we are trying to make that freedom occur within the system that has been established by our oppression and to maintain our oppression and our exploitation. That we have to be engaged in a revolutionary movement, a revolutionary struggle, and that is a protracted struggle. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen tonight. Just because you're pissed off doesn't mean that the revolution is going to happen. Just because you're angry, and you should be angry, and we are all angry, but the African People's Socialist Party, again, is informed. Every action is informed by revolutionary theory, scientific theory. Beyond that, we have even created, and we will speak to some extent during the study, we have created tactics and strategy for the revolutionary process, tactics and strategy for the liberation of our people. The ongoing struggle for science is something that our party has been involved in. Now we're going to be speaking to the political report, to the 2020 political report. From the first plenary of the Seventh Congress. But I think it is important for us to understand that this is a part of the history of our party and of the movement, the overall struggle for African liberation. The African People's Socialist Party does not exist outside the overall struggle of our people. Now, the overall struggle of our people is not something that began in Mississippi. It is not something that began in the US South or any place in this country or in Haiti or in Ghana. It began with the assault on Africa. The assault on Africa is something that is responsible for the poverty, the desperation that African people are living with every day of our lives, every place on the planet Earth. And part of our party is a response to that assault. It is a part of the African revolution. It is a part of the African response. It is not some new Negro response. It is not some response of Black people in America. It is a response to the assault on Africa, and that gave birth to the whole capitalist, foul capitalist socialist system. It is a response to the attack on Africa. One of the most grotesque moments in the history of humanity, where the entire continent of Africa was transformed into a landmass, a place for the creation, production of human beings who would become commodities in a social system that was in the process of coming into being, who would become the laborers, who would become what the white people like to refer to now as the essential workers. We were always the essential workers, always unrecognized, just as the so-called essential workers are unrecognized today. Would not be any capitalism without the attack on Africa. Would not be any capitalism without the assault on the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Would not be any capitalism without England attacking China and stealing all kinds of resources there and forcing China to engage in the opium trade that turned China into a whole nation of junkies. All of this is what brought the whole social system that we are fighting against. This is what brought it into existence. And that's important for us to understand. That's what African internationalism helps us to understand, that we are one Africa, one nation of people engaged in a struggle. And what we are talking about today, when we look at the Political Report 2020, is a consequence and a part of the continuum to liberate all of us, all of Africa, all of African people around the world. And so I just wanted to say that I think it's really important. So what we've seen happen is that if you read certain political histories, you will see that political parties, revolutionary political parties, don't spring just out the foreheads of some African genius, etc. Political parties are actually forged in the process of struggle. And this political party has come about as a consequence of the ongoing struggle within the African project, within the struggle and fight by African people to achieve liberation. And in that process, we have had to contend. We've seen contention between different ideas about what freedoms mean. Freedom means, sometimes we saw people who saw freedom meant that we should, if we were in Congo, integrate with the Belgians who were colonizing us there. And sometimes we saw freedom meaning that simply we would accept the borders that have been created by the colonizers and just build what we could build there. In some instances, we had the belief that that freedom could only be achieved through voting and through the legal system set up by the colonizers. There have been all these ideas that's been in motion, that freedom, that African people are no longer African people, that we are some kind of hybrid, some hyphenated entity, that we are African Americans and Afro-Swedes, and we are just a whole host of other kinds of forces. This is the fodder for which the struggle to achieve clarity and direction and leadership, the party, the African People's Socialist Party, was born in this process. And we have had to contend with these ideas. And the ideas that we've had to contend with, they help to shape who we are today and where we're going today. And if you look at 50 some odd economic institutions that's been created by the African People's Socialist Party, they are institutions that have been influenced by, informed by this history of development and struggle that has given rise to the party. So it's not like the party just popped up and some people came into this organization and say, oh, wow, these are good ideas. But the party came about as a part of the contest within the National Liberation Movement, within the struggle of African people globally. This summation of that struggle is reflected in the existence of the African People's Socialist Party. And for the first time in the history of our struggle, we have an actual revolutionary African working class party, self-conscious working class party of African people that has been shaped and molded, got experience over a whole bunch of struggles and numbers of years and what have you, that has informed us. And at a time in the 1960s, where we saw the revolution almost beheaded, when we saw the revolutionary struggle of our people crushed down, we saw assassinations actually becoming the order of the day. And then where there were attacks on Africa, the African Revolution that went unaddressed by any external force except for us as a people, generally speaking. We had to fight it for ourselves. This is the part of the process that gave rise to the African People's Socialist Party that we know today. So it's not some empty question, not some empty, I got a good idea, let's get together and unite, etc. We've gone through a process of struggling for unity within the African nation, and not just inside this country, that we don't speak to it at some time. Practically within the United States, within the whole, all of the African world, we have fought for that project, fought to unite the African nation, and not just as an abstract question, but in the process of solving the problems of the revolution and advancing the struggle for our liberation. We have done that. And there are people who are around, who are alive today, know that we've initiated this process on several different occasions, and we've been fought against it. And this struggle that we had to make has shaped who we are today. It has helped us to understand more definitively the whole class question that is raging inside the African world, just like it is in various places around the world, and especially during a time when imperialism is experiencing stress and crisis. What we find is that every social force with a stake in the existing system, in the existing social system, is fighting for its life. And sometimes you find the radical African petty bourgeoisie jumping in front, trying to jump in front of the working class, trying to jump in front of the struggle and to take it into the swamps of comfort for them. Comfort, militant comfort, some kind of militant respectability, some kind of militant legality, etc. This is part of what it is we're looking at. And we're saying that African people have to be free, and we've said that for a long time. I want to start now. And I really hope that that comrades in the party and the Hutu movement, that I'm hoping that you will participate in this discussion. It's really important discussion. And I know that sometimes people can be bored by simply reading from these kinds of documents, but it's not meaningless. The fact is that if we are serious about making revolution, and if we recognize our responsibility to take revolutionary theory to the working class itself, not some damn debating clubs, but to the working class itself, and all the communities where we work, and all the institutions that we control, take the revolutionary theory to the working class, take this theory to friends of the working class, of the African working class, people who would be our allies, given an opportunity if they understood what it is that we stand for. And we have to draw lines, because if you don't draw a line, people don't even know how to identify you from and separate you from any other force that's out there active in some way or another that might be trying to drive them into the swamps. So on page 20, we say, we are not just running a store or a flea market. We are on a trajectory to seize political power and to overturn the colonizer. Our objective is to liberate Africa and African people, to produce and reproduce real life for African people. The people working in our more than 50 economic institutions are part of something much bigger than the running of the store. They must see the greater picture. Our party is saying no to the imposed colonial economy while replacing this economy, excuse me, with a liberated anti-colonial African working class economy. The negation of negation. Our forces need to be conscious of this. The ever-developing theory of African internationalism informs the struggle for the liberation of Africa and African people, and hence the global struggle for communism, a scientific ideological expression for the very first time in history. The vanguard status of our party can be found in part by our party satisfying at least two requirements of revolution: a revolutionary party and advanced revolutionary theory. On last week, Comrade T'Challa raised the question of whether or not we should see colonialism itself as a social system, and by which he meant we recognize social systems like feudalism or even slavery. We're talking about ancient slavery. This is certainly part of Marxist theory, slavery, and then what they referred to initially as primitive communism or primitive accumulation, and slavery and feudalism and capitalism as social system. Can we see colonialism as a social system? This is not an empty question. This is a really important theoretical stuff that we've been talking about for a while now. When I go back to the political report to the Sixth Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, that's put in the book, An Uneasy Equilibrium, the African Revolution versus Parasitic Capitalism. We make some, I think, very telling observations here. And I'm saying this just because we're talking about the advanced revolutionary theory, which is absolutely necessary to make a revolution. And we say that the material and human resources of Africa have gone to satisfy the requirements of life for Europeans at the expense of Africa and Africans. This is from the theory of African internationalism. The process of Africans producing and reproducing life has not been primarily for Africa and Africans. It has been primarily for Europe and the white world at our expense. This progenitor of world capitalism, the attack on Africa and Africans, along with the European assault on Asia and the Americas, rescued Europe and Europeans from an oppressive 1,000-year-long disease-ridden, impoverished existence known as feudalism. This was the genesis of the capitalist system as a world economy created on a base of the enslavement of Africans and others. I want to say that again. We say that this is the progenitor of world capitalism. The attack on Africa and Africans, along with the European assault on Asia and the Americas, rescued Europe and Europeans from an oppressive 1,000-year-long disease-ridden, impoverished existence known as feudalism. This was the genesis of the capitalist system as a world economy created on a base of the enslavement of Africans and others. A scientific analysis of human society requires that we take a dialectical approach. We cannot see the world as static and ready-made. Society has to be analyzed as a process that is in a constant state of motion, change, and development. There's always something new arising to replace the old, and all social motion occurs in relationship to this process of coming into existence and dying away. Europe's attack on Africa was effectively an assault on Africa's ability to produce life for itself. This assault has had the effect of pushing Africa and Africans out of history, history being the summation of the ongoing struggle to produce and reproduce life. Slavery, genocide, and colonialism are the stuff of which capitalism was born. African enslavement was first capital in the development of capitalism. The prevailing legal system, culture, religion, and general philosophical outlook or worldview constitute the superstructure of capitalism thus conceived. This superstructure is a natural product and reflection of this economic base of colonial slavery. So let me. I want to just read a bit further. See, there's a way that this question of social systems has been addressed, and especially among what might be characterized as progressives or socialists or communists, etc., where Europe has been the center of this discussion, just like the same thing that happens with the discussion fighting against racism. Europe has been the center of the discussion. When we talk about the emergence of capitalism, when we speak of the colonialism, we speak of the colonialism only as it relates. When we speak of what has happened to Africa and the rest of the world, Marx called this the primitive accumulation of capital. The thing is, what he's just saying is this is the significance of enslaving Africans. This is the significance of the Opium War of China. This is the significance of transforming all of the Americas into fodder for the development of Europe. All of this is important, not because of what it means to the Africans, to the indigenous people, to others, but what it meant to the development of capitalism, what it meant to the development of Europe, which was perceived as the development of human society at large. And now when we look at this, we say, that's shaky. That's problematic. That's fraudulent. The fact is, you cannot sum up the existence and life of all the peoples around the world as simply something that contributes to the emergence of a social system inside Europe. You can't say that the reason that what has happened to us, the conditions we find ourselves fighting more than 100 years after Marx has died, that the significance of all of this was to benefit Europe. It cannot be said that way, that there is a relationship that this had to us. Colonialism was something that affected us. It informed how we would live. It informed everything, not just how we would live, but let me just say this. We say that slavery and colonialism gave rise not only to capitalism, but also to the capitalist and working classes alike of Europe and North America. The workers and the bourgeoisie, the two primary capitalist defining classes, have occasionally fought great battles with each other since their inception as contending social forces. We're talking about European bourgeoisie and workers. Nevertheless, both were born and developed on a platform of slavery and colonialism. Consequently, what is often called class struggle inside the US and Europe is actually contention among the workers and the ruling class for control of the parasitic capitalist pedestal and its stolen resources. The parasitic foundation of world capitalism continues to exist up to now as the true economic base upon which the entire superstructure of the capitalist-defined, capitalist-dominated world exists. The total existence of white people and their ability to produce and reproduce life is dependent on this parasitic relationship that came into being with the attack by feudal Europe on Africa and the world. Instead of separate, more or less self-contained worlds existing in casual relationship to each other, there is one capitalist world system united by a parasitic economic relationship imposed by Europe upon the rest of us. Therefore, there is therefore no European reality separate from that of Africa and the rest of the world. The entire world is now locked into a single dialectical process, a unity of opposites, whereupon the gruesome extraction of life and resources from Africa and the rest of the world is a condition for the life and development of what we now know as Europe, white people and the capitalist system to which we have been forcibly affixed. So the legal system, culture, white sense of sameness, and political institutions are reflections of this parasitic economic base. Every white aspirations and dream, every expectation for happiness and a good life, from a successful marriage to a secure future for their children, requires drone strikes in Pakistan, police murders and mass imprisonment in the African colonies and barrios of the US, and starvation and forced displacement of the oppressed throughout the world. So this is part of this way we've been dealing with this question for a long time now, that the world changed, and it did not change simply according to something that functions that should be defined as simply significant because what it contributed to the development of Europe, because it happened at the expense of the rest of us. And so something else happened in that interim that gave rise to the capitalist system that we call, that is the colonialism, the colonial slavery of African people. The point I would make again is that we're still talking about the unity of theory and practice, and that is fundamentally important, and that this political report speaks to that. So that said, everything that we do, when we went out on yesterday in 6 cities around this country and had these marches for reparations to African people, it was putting the theory into practice. When we see the institutions that we have created within our party, it's putting theory into practice. When we talk about who white people are in the world, as opposed to some mysterious entity, as opposed to some mutation, we consistently connected to a historical materialist understanding of who white people are, and is tied to the economic base of the whole capitalist system and how it benefits and had come into existence at the expense of African people and to the benefit of white people at large, despite the fact that the system is headquartered and the resources and centralized inside a ruling class, the bourgeoisie in this country. So we say that the ever-developing theory of African internationalism, I'm back at the political report to 2020 plenary. The ever-developing theory of African internationalism informs the struggle for the liberation of Africa and African people, and hence the global struggle for communism, a scientific ideological expression for the very first time in history. This is African internationalism. What I'm talking now, what I've just read from you a moment ago, this is not something that came from Marx. It's not something that came from some of the Black intelligentsia, as they like to refer to them. This is the working class intellectuals that we are talking about, people who are having to fight our way out of this oppression, who are on the base of this oppression, who function as the most dynamic sector of the pedestal upon which all of our oppression and exploitation rests. This is where this theory is coming from. It's from those of us sitting on the hot stove who have to define what it really means, as not as spectators, but as people who are affected by being on the hot stove. So we say the vanguard status of our party can be found in part by our party satisfying at least two requirements of revolution: a revolutionary party, one, and advanced revolutionary theory, two. Those are two requirements of revolution: a revolutionary party and advanced revolutionary theory. Elements of the party's theory are to be found ensconced in the utterings of some other African movements, many of which are locked in single issue work, lifestyle politics, or small circle adventures. Few African organizations have the experience, maturity, or resources to advance our revolutionary movement to the next critical stage. So they take understandings from us, sometimes very much out of context. And while many members of the party find themselves annoyed by the assertions of such opportunists and revisionists, it is to be expected. This is a consequence of being the vanguard. We will influence and have influenced the entirety of the liberation and communist movement, even those that are in contention with the party of the African working class, as well as sectors of the ruling class itself, as we have seen. This is how it has always been. This is how it will remain until our party clearly assumes unambiguous leadership of the entire revolutionary process. Members of our party and movement must heed the urgent call of this first plenary of our Seventh Congress to assert full authority and realize the earth-shaking significance of our party for our revolution by vanguarding up and uniting theory and practice on every front, in every area and arena of our revolution. For this plenary, we must do more than just report on the work we have done and what we are planning to do. And I'm saying this because, we have a plenary coming up in February, which will be the second plenary to our Seventh Congress in February 2021. And again, we are saying the same thing now for the plenary that we said then. For this plenary, we must do more than just report on the work we have done and what we are planning to do. We are on a mission, as stated in the Seventh Congress, to build a worldwide liberated African economy that is the foundation of our victory, national liberation, and self-government. We are on a mission, as stated in the Seventh Congress, to build a worldwide liberated African economy that is the foundation of our victory, national liberation, and self-government, self-government, self-government. This plenary will have to say what we have done in terms of accomplishing the basic strategy laid out in our political report. This does not just mean reporting on what we have done in terms of our task, but a comprehensive approach to where we are going. The reports have to lay out the mandates for how our departments, party, and whole movement must move forward. This is a task made easier because we have always recognized the need for unity of theory and practice. We are the party that took the abstraction out of our struggle for national liberation by developing and advancing tactics and strategies for Black liberation at the US at a time when there was none. Our work continues to be guided by our tactics and strategy today, more than 50 years later. Other groups now articulate aspects of this strategy to advance their own credibility. The January 1980 issue of the Burning Spear addressed the history of our party as Vanguard nearly, well, it's 40 years ago, in an article titled APSP Conference Plans Program for New Period. The Burning Spear reveals how we assume the role of the Vanguard even then. This is 40 years ago, in 1980, that we said, quote, with the publication of the Tactics and Strategy for Black Liberation pamphlet, the party deepened the theoretical basis of our ideological position and laid out a general method for struggling for Black liberation within current US borders, finally bringing science to the Black movement and enabling the struggle to take a broad, unified position on the nature and character of our struggle. We say broad unifying position here, but as the party organized September 4th, 1977 demonstration to demand freedom for Desi Woods was a major breakthrough in that a broad representation from the Black nationalist movement came together on the same platform for the first time in a decade, causing the chairman to exclaim at the rally, finally, the Black liberation movement is in the hands of Black people once again. Black is back, so to speak, 40 years ago. The subsequent Desi Woods demonstration in Plains, Georgia on July 4th, 1978, had the same kind of impact, this time resulting in support from other colonized peoples. The recent building of the African National Prison Organization, ANPO, was but another example of the party's ongoing efforts to rebuild the Black liberation movement, bringing science and a strategy to the movement. Now, clear evidence of a revitalized Black movement can be seen. When the party was born, there was no movement, so we built it, the chairman said. When the movement was built, it lacked the practical experiences of struggle, so we taught it. When the movement learned to struggle, it lacked clear ideological analysis, so we provided it. When the movement accepted our ideological analysis, it lacked a strategy for African liberation within the US, so we constructed a strategy. So that's the end of that quote. And this is from a 1980 issue of the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the organ of the African People's Socialist Party, which is the longest existing revolutionary African publication in the world, and which is something that has consistently summed up and defined our struggle and advanced our struggle and even moved in every way we could to unite the African liberation movement as a whole. This is no empty call for national unity. In every instance, we talk about building the African National Reparations Organization. This was something, first of all, we talked about building the African National Prison Organization. This came immediately in the wake of the 1977 mobilization to free Desi Woods that happened in Atlanta, Georgia. For the first time in a decade, we saw the African National Revolution, the pro-independent sector of the movement, come together, come to life, and take on struggles. And then we made a determination. I had a meeting at that time with one of the most important, with a very important force from our struggle. I mean, Comrade Akbar Muhammad Ahmed, known as Max Stanford, in some instances, I met, say, look, how can we unify this struggle? How do we unify the movement? And the prison question became the question that we said we would do. And the African People's Socialist Party was struck out to do that with the assumptions, with the objective of uniting all of the so-called pro-independence forces around this question of prisons and political prisoners to get them out of prison within the context of an overall struggle to free our people out of the prison system. We did a whole thing of how Africans are a nation behind bars that reflected the huge number of African people who were stuffed in prisons 40 years ago or so. We did this. And so we said, let's build an African National Prison Organization. And then what happened was with the people we were supposed to have been working with to do this, they broke ranks after we had this extraordinarily successful conference, otherwise in Louisville, Kentucky in 1979, to pull it together. These forces broke rank from one of the significant political organizations, and where we said we're going to do this together, rushed off to New York, took the same documents that we used to come together in Louisville, Kentucky in 1979, and then set up to create their own separate thing. We said the African National Reparations Organization, 1982, when we forced this, the objective again to bring together the whole African liberation movement, not just any kind of liberation movement, but those of us who were opposed to colonialism, those what we characterize as the pro-independence sector of the movement. The party did that. It's not some empty thing. Let's how do we unite the nation and write a position paper and come and discuss the position. We wrote a paper on this being how we unite it and practice, because you can't just have national unity, a liberation movement that's based on just some abstract concepts. The abstract concepts are good, but what we need is the ability to have a practical relationship of forging the movement that allows each of us to submit to this general trajectory for national liberation in the process of solving the problems of the revolution, in the process of advancing the struggle collectively. That's what we try to do. And there are people who are alive today who struggle with us sometimes where we can see them, and sometimes clandestinely, they struggle with us because they hate the party of the working class. And because every instance we tried to do this, they broke ranks and they went in to do their own thing, or they refused to support it. We built the African National Reparations Organization. We had the first World Tribunal on Reparations for African people in history. We are the ones who took the reparations issues out of the closet and turned it over to, made it a mass issue and put the masses in motion around this question. But the petty bourgeoisie, sometimes nationalists and otherwise, refused to participate in being part of the organization. They would come sometimes and they would speak at the tribunals that we organized, but they refused, and this was set up initially for the whole national liberation movement to be a part of it. So the point that I'm making is class struggle existed even then. The class struggle was revealing itself, and this is part of what helped to shape and define who we are as a party. We did the same thing around the African Socialist International. I traveled to Europe for years, having major conferences all over Europe, especially in London, with the objective of trying to build the African Social International, worldwide party of African people. And what we were running to the same kind of stuff, because we were looking at the African petty bourgeoisie, and there's a reason for that. Because the struggle of our people in the 1960s, as militant as it may have been at some sectors, was led, generally speaking, by the African petty bourgeoisie, sometimes radical, but who could be satisfied with something short of the total, absolute liberation of Africa and African people and unification of African people. And this is the position of the working class. This is revolution that we were forging and fighting for. So anyway, the title of our 2020 plenary is Vanguard Up, the unity of theory and practice. However, it should be clear that the role of the party as the advanced detachment began with our inception as a party. As demonstrated by the quoted article in the Burning Spear that was produced in January 1980, 2 generations before the convening of the party's plenary in February 2020. The struggle for unity and theory and practice is one we have always pursued. It is a pursuit that has always defined us as the advanced detachment. The first plenary of the, and by the way, everything I'm saying is something that can be researched. You can, I mean, I'm not making up anything here, just in terms of the whole struggle that's been led by the African People's Socialist Party for more than 40 years to complete the revolution of the 60s, which includes trying to consolidate the national liberation movement, first of all, as an anti-colonial movement, and then secondly, it's something that would happen under the leadership of the African working class. And so we did those things. The first plenary of the party's 7th Congress is occurring nearly a year and a half after our October 2018 Congress. Our work since that Congress can be characterized as generally good, and we have achieved unquestionable successes in many ways that confirm the validity of choosing Vanguard as a title of my political report to the Congress. Our Seventh Congress took place from October 6th through 5th through 12th, 2018. But the work of the Congress began much earlier with the creation of the Congressional Committee, comprised of the entire Central Committee. The pre-Congress work included the 4-month-long party discussion of the political report, the main resolution of the Congress. That's really important. Again, we are a political party. You know, you've heard some people, they come up with ridiculous reasons for attacking the African working class. First of all, there's a great suspicion with the African petty bourgeoisie of the African working class. They really can't stand us. They can't stand the discipline that's required of a revolutionary party. The petty bourgeoisie intellectuals hate discipline. That also is something that applies to them. And they detest the African working class. We don't speak properly. We don't use the same kind of language that they have got from some of these institutions that they have attended, and whether they are, you know, the kinds of institutions of the state, or whether they are institutions that they have contrived themselves to prove their own intellectual prowess and genius. We aren't like that. And we've got people who can barely read and write, but who understand African internationalism and who fight in the trenches every day, because our responsibility is to take the theory to the masses of the people. This is how we're going to have a revolution. And this is what's going to guarantee that the revolution that we make is going to be a democratic revolution. When I say democratic, I mean because the people will be the key participants, the African working class. And the thing that helps that to be true is the African working class, they have to have access to the information, to political understanding, to political theory. And if once the masses grasp this political theory, then there cannot be anything that the petty bourgeoisie or imperialism proper will be able to defend themselves from. So, so we say even our Congress is a vanguard initiative, as there is no other revolutionary African political party in the US, and few in the world that open up their organizational process to facilitate the full democratic participation of their membership in charting their course and determining their leadership. So we talk about the Seventh Congress, like all of our Congress, we had like a 4-month-long discussion of the political report. People could debate it. They can say, yeah, I agree with this. It's something that we talked about over and over, just like we're going to this political report now. We're doing this not as some kind of exercise to show how smart we are. This is not a discussion for anybody to be able to participate and show how smart you are. It is something that we have to grasp and understand that these are decisions. This is a political report that was voted on and adopted by the African People's Socialist Party. And not only among our own memberships, but also in front of approved observers who were there, and also something that was witnessed by people from throughout the world who were able to participate in the full plenary and the process itself through electronic means. So, so we say that members of our party clearly experience deep personal and subjective feelings for each other. But such personal or subjective feelings are not the basis for our relationship. We are the vanguard. The advanced attachment and our subjective and personal feelings for each other are based on our collective, unwavering commitment to African internationalism and the total liberation and unification of our Africa and African people globally. And you will hear some detractors, some people who are attacking the party will say things like that represents some kind of dictatorship, no, what we're saying is absolute unity. But we are going up against the most dangerous, most vicious, the most brutal, bloody social system has ever inhabited the planet Earth. And to do that, we need to have a revolutionary disciplined party that has the long view, that cannot be taken off point by just things that's happening, but that's tied to the strategical objective for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people globally. It has the long view. We engage in a protracted struggle. The reason we're having this discussion today is because even after the attack on the Black Revolution of the 1960s, we continue to forge ahead, first through the organizations that contributed to the development of the party and through the party itself. That's why we're here, the long view, and others fell aside. Others, none of the other organizations exist, and not revolutionary organizations. And many of the so-called revolutionary leaders, they quit the field and they were no longer engaged in revolutionary activity, but that's not true of the African People's Socialist Party. So we say that our Africa, this is the basis of our recognition that the unity of our party, the only hope for the liberation of our people, the emancipation of all the oppressed and workers of the world is sacred. Members of our party clearly experience deep personal and subjective feelings for each other, but such personal or subjective feelings are not the basis for our relationship. We love people in the party, but it doesn't mean that we love the errors. It doesn't mean that we love you so much that we sacrifice the revolution, the movement on our personal feelings for you. And this is the problem for some people, because there's this whole ongoing struggle to have African people simply mobilized by our emotions, unable to lock in to what the long-term objectives of our struggle for freedom require. And it requires a disciplined revolutionary organization of steel cadre who've been forged through this process, through this whole historical process that I've just been defining. And so we say that, this is the basis for our recognition that the unity of our party, the only hope for the liberation of our people, the emancipation of all the oppressed and workers of the world is sacred. The unity is sacred. It's a sacred unity. You cannot be sacrificed for some personal whim of somebody who's got upset because somebody looked at them the wrong way or didn't say the right thing when they greeted them or some nonsense like that. And who would dare to attack our party, our movement, our membership without being able to say, I disagree, because here's the theory that is wrong. No, what they say is, we love the theory. We're going to take the theory. We're going to call it something else, but it's our theory. We just don't like the ones who brought it into existence. They want to have the tree without having the roots. They want to say that there's something about this tree, this beautiful tree, that has no relationship to its roots. And we're saying that the roots, African internationalism, comes from the African People's Socialist Party, and that while people are grabbing it and pretending and preening as if it were their own, all of us know where it comes from, and that we have to not even be caught up on that so much as we have to just keep a fixation, be fixed on what our goals are, our long-term struggle is about, what our tactics and strategy happens to be, and forge this revolutionary project forward. So we say that many non-African internationalists are intoxicated by the Jerry Springer, Donald Trump type reality shows that are the bourgeois diversions that serve to distract the people from the profound contradictions confronting the African nation and working class. These shows are tools used to dumb down the colonized nation and working class in particular. As the advanced detachment, we have accepted as our responsibility the task to help the oppressed repossess their brains from the clutches of our oppressors by exposing the political contradictions that continue to keep us enslaved. And you know, to get a good idea of what we're talking about is that if you go through any of the supermarkets existing in the United States, and perhaps that's true in some parts of Europe and other places, what you will find when you go to the supermarkets, you would see these tabloid magazines. You see this also on the streets in London and other places like that, you know, with silly stuff about whether, you know, a two-headed goat found on the moon, or Elvis is hiding on Mars, or just ridiculous stuff like that, horoscopes and things like that. This is for the working class. You can't find foreign affairs there. You can't find, even in some communities, I used to be in Brooklyn, I couldn't find a copy of the New York Times in the local stores in Brooklyn. That was for the upper classes. For the masses, they keep us drowned in nonsense and in like horoscopes and stuff like that. This is where we are supposed to be able to divine the future. Where the Wall Street Journal is giving us a better example, explanation, whether it's the best one or whether it's true or not, of what's happening economically and how the world is configured. You got to go by horoscopes. You got to go by stuff like that, and that's preached to us on a regular basis. That's why for our community, it's satisfactory to leadership. They get a sports figure, somebody who can run football well, and ask them for their opinion about the most important critical questions facing the African nation. They get a hip hop artist who has no political education at all, except what they might have been discerned from a popular song or from having heard part of a speech by Malcolm X or something like that, and ask their opinion. This is where the movement is being offered leadership by the bourgeoisie in this country. But you won't see it coming from the revolution. They will put forth obscurantism. They would hand one form of religion or superstition or something like that as the guiding basis for our struggle. And African internationalism, the African People's Socialist Party, give us a different approach to this question. And that's why we talk about the unity of theory and practice. And we talk about a vanguard, an African revolutionary organization based in the African working class that for the first time in history arms the African working class to be able to become the primary social forces that will define what the world is going to look like in a fashion that satisfies the interests of the African and the oppressed peoples of the world. Uhuru, comrades.
Uhuru, Chairman, well, I just really want to appreciate this really dynamic, incredible study up to now. Yeah, this has been very profound. I want to go ahead and just announce that we're going into our question and answer period. We do have questions that have rolled in already, so we'll be getting right into those. But for those who don't know, you can ask your question right now, type them into the Facebook or YouTube chat, and type them up quickly so that we can address them during this hour portion. I also want to recognize where people are watching from. We have viewing with us in Kuwait, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Brooklyn, New York, Lakeland, Florida, Pinellas Park, Florida, South Africa or Occupy Tanzania, Chicago, Illinois, London, UK, Hempstead, New York, Portland, Oregon, New Jersey, Nigeria, Boston, Massachusetts, Atlanta, Georgia, Huntsville, Alabama, Tampa, Florida, Brazil, San Diego, California, Ethiopia, and Surrey, UK. So that's where people are watching from. And we're going to go into our first question, which comes from Sister Janelle Owens on Facebook. Janelle asks, Uhuru, Chairman, can you explain further how Black community control of the police will advance our struggle and what it would entail? You're muted, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Comrade Janelle. I muted myself. Usually it's the bourgeoisie that does that, but I think that's a really important question because when we talk about Black community control of the police, it is not just an empty slogan. It is a slogan that is also contextualized by the struggle that we are making against the so-called anti-racism politic. Empty politic that don't take us any place. It's a struggle and slogan that we talk about in contests with the Black Lives Matter slogan, which doesn't take us any place. It's a whining, pitiful declaration, I guess, to the oppressors that our lives matter, when clearly our lives do not matter to the oppressors, and we have no doubt that it matters to us. But what happens is when you say Black community control of police, what you have done is that you put forth a slogan, especially now, and even though this was something that was important to us and we've been raising it since the 70s, especially now, when growing numbers of people are in motion and struggle, trying to respond to the terror being imposed on our communities by this domestic military colonial force called the police, that's murdering us in plain view of everybody else. And so and then especially when you look at the fact that it is a struggle that's been kicked off by African people resisting, but what the bourgeoisie likes to show is all kind of people to join, white people with their fist up, etc., who all have the ability to say Black Lives Matter. But what we have to do is say Black community control of the police, because what this does is a demand that that negates the influence, negates the presence of the military occupation force, the colonial military occupation forces in our community, the police. And when we say Black community control of the police, that's part of what we're advancing. And the other thing about it is, when we say Black community control of the police, it's something that also recognizes that it gives the people an opportunity and ability to take their own initiatives and struggle against the police and military occupation in our communities. We have come up with a formula which under some circumstances earlier on, particularly allowed for us to make this a mass demand for the people. The objective was to get Africans out in the streets when anything happens in Black communities control of the police. That's the demand, control of the police. And there's more discussion for the masses of African people than anything else, but we gave instruments to people who were organizers. You can take such things like resolution to the city hall, use this as a platform, a political platform to raise the demand for Black community control of the police. So that people can hear it and participate in that discussion. Get petitions signed demanding Black community control of the police, so that every person who signs that petition becomes an owner of that position about Black people controlling the police ourselves in our own communities. But it also allows people to take any other means necessary to push the military occupying forces out of our community. We demand the immediate withdrawal of the military occupying forces from the African community. That's the police. And so the people then can use their own genius, their own means by which that should occur, but that's what should be generalized throughout the African world, throughout the African community, and that's neutralizing the colonial state and negating it, not just saying no to it, but replacing it with the power of the people, which becomes the popular state of the African working class. Uhuru. I hope that was helpful, Sister Janelle. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And just want to acknowledge some people dropped their locations. So I just want to shout out these forces or these areas: Houston, Texas, Washington, D.C., Peekskill, New York, Sierra Leone, Sweden, Stockholm, Richmond, Virginia, and Los Angeles, California. Checked in, Uhuru. So the next question was asked, similar questions were asked by two different people. And it's revolving the situation in Nigeria with this whole thing around End SARS. And people want for you to be able to sum up that struggle happening in Nigeria.
Say more about it.
Well, it's asking, can you address what's going on in Nigeria? Britain was exposed for funding the SARS police killing the youth.
Yeah. The state, the Nigerian state is an extraordinarily interesting, well, I guess you could probably speak to the peculiarities of all of the state entities that's been created to dominate African people. As you know, Nigeria as an entity was created by the British and given its designation in 1915 by this Sir Frederick Lugard, who was an instrument of British imperialism, as one of the real authorities, one of the real authors of the strategy of neo-colonialism, or indirect rule as it was characterized, and which was something that became extremely important to the European rulers after the incredibly significant and powerful struggle of our people in Kenya, the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, Mau Mau, where people fought the British Empire to a standstill for a number of years before Britain just massacred more than 300,000 African people there to maintain and strangle. This is a tea-sipping, genteel British that are exporting civilization around the world. If you listen to their own narrative, it's similar to the narrative of colonizers, worldwide and in this country as well. And so in 1915, Lugard, through his mistress and who became his wife, Flora Shaw, came up with a name for this administrative hold that they have created from different parts of this territory in West Africa. And they called it, remember, these are borders that were created by the British. Africans didn't have anything to do with creating these borders. The Europeans created these borders and in this area that disregarded any of the history of our people and locked it into this thing that Flora Shaw, Lugard's wife, called a nigger area. And it has been chaos as it was supposed to be. So that just trying to govern that situation through neo-colonial means has meant various vicious forms of colonial terror that's imposed on our people there. And there have been responses to this colonial terror. Some of it ultimately turned armed, where we've seen armed responses. Some of it tried to be peaceful and then were met with the vicious repression by the military, often military governments in Nigeria. And so Nigeria is a false entity, just like just like all of the colonial entities are. So when you're looking at the crisis that's being discussed in Nigeria, what you're looking at is the absence of the revolutionary leadership that the party has to provide. And I'm saying this to all the African internationalists and all the members of the party who are there, that your work is cut out for you, that we have to impose on this situation an African internationalist analysis that helps the people to understand that the future of Africa is going to be determined by our ability to create a political organization that will fight for the unification of Africa and African people on our own terms. And that the Nigerian government is a fraudulent entity, just like all of the neo-colonial powers are. They're not there to serve us. They cannot serve us. They serve imperialism. They serve empire. And they've tossed out all kinds of resources. Some corporations have their own armies in Nigeria. I'm talking about some of the oil corporations and others who, from time to time, take on punitive expeditions to oppress and kill different ones of our people. We're locked into vicious kinds of religious sectarian wars there because the definition of who we are as a nation has been prescribed, has been limited to the contours of these borders that have been created for us. African internationalists have to destroy that, have to destroy this whole notion of the ethnic superiority, one ethnic over the other. We have to fight for the whole of Africa. We have to fight for a united Africa under the leadership of the African working class as exercised through its advanced detachment, the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru. Who was that from?
Uhuru, that was from Comrade Kabula, and it was someone on YouTube, but it's the username and it doesn't really the name, but two people asked the same question.
All right. Uhuru.
All right, our next question comes from AJ on YouTube. AJ asks, why don't revolutionaries connect with these athletes, actors, musicians, and folk who have access to people in power?
I don't know why revolutionaries don't connect with them. Some revolutionaries, I think, may, and some revolutionaries may try to. There are a few people who have been in touch with us who are athletes, and they have to make up their own minds in terms of whether or not they will maintain a certain kind of attachment to the system itself. And as you know, there are certain cultural workers, performers, artists with whom we have a great relationship, and at least one, I think almost notoriously famous basketball player with who has reached out to us and we've had discussions with. But each of them will have to make a decision about coming on over. So much of them more faithful to their ability to live lives of relative security through relationships with the entities that provide income through sponsorships and other stuff like that, and they play it safe, generally speaking, and you seldom see them break from that safety network, a safety net that they keep under themselves. And some, for example, right now we're in discussion with the foundation that an incredibly important basketball player, today, is trying to unite with our Black Power Blueprint project, or with the Black Power Blueprint project. So we do have some connections like that. And again, more athletes are going to have the courage. It's not good enough just to speak up and be anti-oppression, et cetera, because what the hell does that mean, generally speaking? You know what I mean? That the thing is that you have to be able to support the revolutionary projects and find a way to do that. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do it publicly. If you can't do it publicly, do it secretly. But the point is that that's a responsibility that we have. And this is not a call necessarily. I think when the crisis deepens more and more, we're going to see, as we already see, that some athletes are being emboldened by mass uprising. So they say stuff they never said before. But this is not necessarily a call for anybody to, at this point, to openly disrupt their capacity to earn a living. You may or may not be able to do that, but you have a responsibility to make contributions to this revolutionary project. Make contributions to the revolutionary project, you have a responsibility, just like everybody else. If some poor person living in a damn housing project, if we can call on them to do that, whether they're going to be cut off welfare, whether they're going to be kicked out of public housing, whether the police are going to gun them down in their communities, et cetera, on a regular basis, and then we can count on you to do more than taking a damn knee at a ball game. You have to support the revolutionary project. That's the responsibility, and that's one that we call on athletes and other culture workers to do, because as quiet as it's kept, as good as an athlete may be, as splendid as a cultural worker may be, regardless of the numbers of awards that they get, their origin is in the African community. That's where it comes from. That's where the genius comes from. That sometimes the ones who are best recognized are not necessarily the best that came out of that was in that community. And for whatever reason, they were the ones who were thrust forward, et cetera. So, I mean, look at what might have happened if AI had, how many athletes fell victim to the attack on that you saw that happened with Allen Iverson. If the colonial course had taken shape and actually prevailed, Iverson never would have been a successful basketball player. That's the colonialism is working at you all the time. So you have a responsibility to do something beyond that. You do. And you can't use having to make a living as the only excuse, because that's what the dope dealers say. I got to make a living somewhere, so you got to do better than that. Uhuru.
Uhuru, yes, Chairman, I really unite with that. And, even a lot of these celebrities are now, they'll come out and they'll say something that might be a little bit radical, and then they'll, somebody clearly sat them down and then now they're telling Africans to vote,
yeah.
So. Yeah, I definitely unite with that.
I mean, we saw people who won the hearts of African people because they came out and recognizing what was happening to our people with FTP. That resonated so much. That's what thrust them into some superstardom FTP, because it resonated with the reality of African people. And now nothing has changed on the ground for our people, but what has changed is their language, their line. And what has changed is their language, because what has changed for them. That the people whom they addressed and spoke to and for, they were once one of those people. But now they have been elevated by their own, by fame and money. They are in another category that somehow, propels them out of the reality that the rest of us are dealing with. That's what happened in Ferguson, St. Louis, when that boy Mike Brown was left riding for 4.5 hours on 100+ degree asphalt. The people in St. Louis, they rose up and they said, "Kill the police, kill the police." There was nothing ambiguous about that slogan at all. They didn't say Black Lives Matter. It was dilettantes who were parachuted into Ferguson, St. Louis with a host of other opportunists who came up with that slogan. And so, the thing is that once you get separated from the mass of the people, then your political line definitely will suffer, Uhuru, or not.
Uhuru, Chairman. Our next question comes from Comrade Morlai in Sierra Leone. He asked, Uhuru, Chairman, how do we settle the tribal contradiction among the working class in Africa, especially when the ruling class is using it to divide the people?
That's true. That's one of the real big contradictions we're facing with, because that helps even to obscure the class contradictions that exist among Africans often. Because this whole notion of tribe and ethnic domination is something that the African petty bourgeoisie will use against us. African petty bourgeoisie from different ethnic groups who will suck up to and sell out the whole African nation, the whole African population to imperialist white power, will find all kinds of reasons to provoke African workers and poor people and fight against each other in order to advance their particular economic interests, their political interests. And we've seen that happen all over Africa. That these treacherous puppets will have Africans killing each other in grotesque ways in order to ultimately to protect the existing social system and their benefits from that social system. So what we do, comrade, and this is really important in a place like Sierra Leone, another place, because the political restrictions are very severe in Sierra Leone. And just in terms of even being able to establish a working class party there in Sierra Leone is so expensive that it's almost impossible for workers to be able to do that. So convoluted and contrived that it's very difficult for workers to do that. So the whole issue of democracy is really important. And I think that what has to happen, if you remember, when Nkrumah and Lumumba were able to participate in a colonially controlled electoral process, the assumption was that neither of them would be able to become the prime ministers or heads of state because of the colonially contrived ethnic divisions. But both Nkrumah and Lumumba surprised them because they organized and they won sectors of the population across all ethnic groups. And what we as leaders have to do, the advanced detachment, first of all, we have to abandon some loyalty to some ethnicity as the primary thing. We have to do that. We have to exclaim that we are Africans primary. And we're saying that we're Africans, and we're not saying that this is against you because you Fulani, that you come from some other ethnicity, but we're saying that whatever ethnicity that you may have is subordinate to our overall identity. Our primary identity is Africa, and that we have to fight in the interest of Africa. And you know what? Only the African working class, the advanced detachment, can really pursue that, because sectors of the petty bourgeoisie are so self-centered that they find themselves all the time trying to take advantage of each other as opposed to fighting for Africa. So African internationalists have to lead that struggle, and we have to do political education on an ongoing basis and win people to programs, win people to a national democratic revolutionary program in Sierra Leone that calls on unity of the working class, that calls on expulsion of the thieves, the imperialists and what have you, who are stealing all our, calls on destruction of the borders that separate Sierra Leone from neighboring African entities, calls on the workers to have powers and democratic process that will also challenge the limitation that's imposed on even on the electoral process. The African working class has to assume that responsibility. So I hope that's helpful, Comrade Uhuru.
Real. Thank you, Chairman. Again, that was from Comrade Molai in Sierra Leone.
Comrade Molai, I just want to repeat that we engage in a protracted struggle. I'm not going to give you something that you can go and take a pill and then say, wow, that's it, or put something in the water. Well, I wouldn't, it's so hard to drink the damn water in Sierra Leone as the petty bourgeois neo-colonial forces there won't even clean the damn water system. It's a protracted struggle. And as cadre, as a member of the advanced detachment, you have to lock yourself into that and develop tactics and strategies to make this happen, to make this work, to put a revolutionary national democratic program before the masses of the people, do the ongoing work that will make that happen. And we will be victorious because what we will do will expose the relationship that the African petty bourgeois neo-colonial forces have to our oppression. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Our next question comes from Comrade Matsamela in San Diego, California. It says, Uhuru, Chairman, can you explain how the party has applied the lessons from organizing the African National Prison Organization and the African National Reparations Organization to the organization of the Black is Back Coalition?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that two things. I want to congratulate you, Comrade Matsamela, and all the comrades in San Diego. I know it was a Uhuru Solidarity movement that really pushed that days in reparation for African people. And I just thought it was a splendid mobilization. And you even got, I found it interesting that you even got a quality reporting from bourgeois media there. But the African National Prison Organization and the African National Reparations Organization, these were attempts that the party made to unite the national liberation movement under one banner, because there was an assumption at this time that all of us wanted, at least in general terms, more or less the same thing. This was a means by which we would, the party was committed to advancing the leadership of the pro-independent sector of the African liberation movement. We went so far as to, you mentioned those two examples, but we went so far as to try and create a single party consisting of the African People's Socialist Party, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, as it was called, the African People's Party, Republic of New Africa, and another military wing of our movement. We're gonna make a single party. That's what we said we would do. And none of this stuff worked out. And because it was class questions that divided us. And we've come to understand that it was class and the unwillingness of, because some of these forces, for example, say, well, we don't work with you because you have the African People's Solidarity Committee and we don't trust the white people. But they had secret relationships of their own with white people. They did. And at one time, we almost had the physical confrontation in Oakland, California, where we engaged in a struggle for self-determination, and their white allies, they would set up a situation where their white so-called allies would try to intervene, and we had incredible movement in Oakland. And bring them into Oakland, California. We had, that can't work. And, had to explain in no uncertain terms that this is improper. So the point is that that wouldn't work. And building the African Socialist International, traveling all over, we're building a single party that didn't work. And because the class question just really compromised it, just really frustrated the effort. With the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, for peace, Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, the objective is not to build a single organization like that. It's an organization of organizations, essentially. So there's 17 different organizations who come into this organization recognizing that we all have different politics, et cetera. And then there's 100 and some odd members of that organization that recognize that there are different lines here, and that we just unite around these basic principles that all of us are accountable for. And of course, a fundamental principle that of the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination, this body is something that we took out to masses of the people and came together and said, this is who we are as a coalition. And then there are principles of unity as a coalition, as an organization of organizations. And that's a big difference. And that made it possible up to now. It's not without tensions. It's not without struggles. And it's not without, an element of what do you call it? People, moving to, do things in their own way, sometimes to their advantage. It's all right, everybody does stuff for their advantage, but it shouldn't be done to the disadvantage of the coalition itself. And that's been successful. Comment Masamela Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. A question came in from Kwame Madden on Facebook, and he wanted for you to suggest 5 books to start for a study group, or any study materials that you would suggest for him, I guess, to start looking at and studying.
Uhuru, thank you, Kamal. I think one book I would suggest to you is the one that we've been using for much of our studies from the 6th and 7th political report to the 6th and 7th Congresses, and which are relatively easy to get your hands on. And the thing about that, of course, is that it's just not some abstract book, but it explains things even in the process of making struggle, and how it helps to say, this is how we came to these conclusions. And so you can make judgments about them yourselves, and that's good. I think you should read Penny Hess's book, Overcoming a Culture of Violence, which is a whole history of violence by Europe on the rest of us, on Africa and the rest of us, that has this, based on African internationalist science. And so it's not just empty history, but history that comes to a conclusion, that makes a prediction, if you will, of the victory of the African Revolution, et cetera. I think that's a really important book that everybody should read. You get an opportunity to do that. So those are 3 books that I think to be extremely important. And there are others. I feel that I think it was it the political report to the 3rd or 4th Congress, Isbe Letu Africa. I don't know how easy that is to get to. And the reason I'm saying this is because what you will find in the political reports is that we have had to assault many of the sort of calcified or ossified notions of what makes revolution, revolutionary theory, et cetera. And we've participated in developing a whole theoretical basis for the struggle of African people and for human history itself. It's Isbe Letu. I can't remember if it's the 3rd or 4th, a report to the 3rd or 4th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And I found that to be one of the breakthroughs of political theory. And I think what could be helpful is that for the first Congress of our party held in 1981 in Oakland, California, there was a document for that Congress called A New Beginning. And I think you would find that extremely helpful also. And what's helpful in part about that is the fact that you will see that though that was written in 1982, you can see the ramifications. You can see how it's something that is still playing itself out right now. there's a man, Jim Foreman. Let me just say, James Foreman wrote a book, The Making of Black Revolutionaries, which I think was very good. He was one of the first most important leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He wrote a great book. You should read that. Robert Allen wrote a book, Black Awakening in Capitalist America. I think those are good books that you might want to look at as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. Again, that came from Brother Kwame Madden.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Where's Kwame at? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know where.
Okay, Uhuru. Thank you, Kwame.
Uhuru, Chairman. And just to say that those texts that Chairman was talking about regarding overturning the culture of violence by Penny Hess, as well as Vanguard, the advanced attachment of the African Revolution, and the different writings by Chairman can be found at burningspearmarketplace.com. The next question comes from Mensa Ajanaku on YouTube. He asks, imperialism is in crisis. Many Africans are being fed propaganda in personalized manners to utilize subjectively against us. How do we not fall into the oppressor's trap and truly unite?
Thank you, Comrade Mensa. It's been a long time since I've heard from you. Yeah, that's real serious. I mean, much of what makes it serious is it feeds into a kind of political immaturity that exists in our movement. That's one of the things that should make you and everybody else understand the value of the African People's Socialist Party. What has happened in the past is that our revolutionary organizations have not been able to exist long enough. The social system, the imperialism, so vicious that has crushed our revolutionary organization. So if you've got an organization last 3 or 4 years, it's really about trying to make revolution. That was extraordinary. And the Black Panther Party is an example of that. You know, even the Garvey movement, which is an incredible movement, and the ruling class, the bourgeois, the imperialist forces have moved in a way that not only destroys our organizations, but kill our leaders, and it makes a major assault on the ideas of the revolution. And revolutionary organizations have not been able to exist, generally speaking, long enough to achieve experience and political maturity. And that's not a small thing, because the revolution has to go on. Regardless of what happened to any of us as individuals, the revolution has to go. We institutionalize the revolution in the form of the Revolutionary Party. That's why the significance of a party that's been here for almost 50 years on the ground, that's incredible. And the experience and maturity that has happened there. That's why you will see that from time to time, these subjective rantings from people, you know, just the most lewd and obscene attacks that's directed at the party. You will not see us indulging in that kind of political immaturity, because it doesn't help us. It drags us down to that whole state of immaturity. It contributes to helping the African people not take our revolution struggle. It's like these squabbles that we have on the block. It's the thing that makes us take out the 9 and shoot somebody because they stepped on our shoe. It destroys our vision, our ability to have faith in the long term. It destroys the connection that we're supposed to have to the masses of our people to make a revolution and take us out of this quagmire of oppression and desperation. And so instead of dealing with the real serious political issues and questions, what we find is that I mentioned it earlier on, this certain kind of Jerry Springer, Donald Trumpism, you know, that is able today to pass as some kind of revolution, as some kind of meaningful criticism, in part because of the weakness of the ideological weakness of the whole movement that is tolerated by the movement. It's tolerated by people who call themselves revolutionaries and what have you. And part of the reason it's tolerated because there's a kind of one-upsmanship that happens in the movement, that the objective is not to discover the truth. The objective is not to be able to expose contradictions, but the objective is to be able to get more likes than somebody else, or to get more approval than somebody else, and to see the existence of the Revolutionary Party as something that threatens your own significance. That's the kind of stuff we're contending with. So Comrade Mensah, I just want to say that it's you know, the fact that we have people who can be in an organization for 3 months and then split from the organization because they are so significant themselves that they can't even have a long-term relationship. They despise discipline. They despise organization unless they are on top of it. They can't have a decent relationship with a revolutionary process, and you should be suspicious of that. You should require more of that, and you should be yourself a part of this revolutionary project that is fighting for the long-term interests of our people, that has institutionalized itself for almost 50 years. That's no small thing. And when I say institutionalized, I'm talking about an organization that's seen its leadership handcuffed, beaten, shot at, imprisoned, and what have you. This is what we are talking about, this kind of revolutionary organization that has withstood all of that and has come to conclusions about who we are, where we have to go through a process of forging through fire. This is who the African people are. So our history is there for anybody to investigate. I mean, we didn't wake up yesterday and then get discovered by somebody. We fought for this ourselves as a party, and we fought for it and held the line for almost 50 years. Comrade. And that's the kind of thing that we have to require that. You can look at our history, and that's the testimony of who we are, and we have to require that people just, you know, we should be intolerant of gossip and slander. We should be intolerant. You can't have a movement. The FBI helped to destroy a revolutionary, had people assassinating each other in the 1960s by dropping slander here, writing a letter here, forging this kind of document, and having people fighting each other all over the place based on subjectivism. So what we are saying is, this is why we're having this discussion today, to fight for revolutionary science, for an objective assessment of our reality based on a theoretical foundation of what it is that we're fighting for. Uhuru, thank you for that question, Comrade Mensah, or that observation. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. That was really profound answer. Uhuru, thank you. The next question comes from Moti Casanova Valderrama on Facebook. He asks, Uhuru, Chairman, please forgive my ignorance. Could you elaborate on the term vanguard? Being a military brat, I have always heard of vanguard as a military term. And part 2 of the question, whom do you consider the rear guard of the party? Uhuru. That is from Comrade Moti.
Well, vanguard is a military term. I mean, it can be a military term. It is something that we're talking about, that advanced force, that force that goes out, you know, in many instances and ways before the main body, you know, the vanguard. It's like the tip of the spear, so to speak. And the vanguard is something that, in terms of our party, it is the most resolute sector of the revolutionary movement. It is that sector that that is determined to withstand all of the attacks on the revolutionists that is in front. So that's when we just we're talking a moment ago about slander and stuff like that. That's if you beheaded, if you attack the leadership, if you hit the vanguard, then it's easy to get to the masses of the people. So the vanguard, before we could clearly see there was a vanguard, the oppression of our people was generalized. Just kill all the niggas, just treat everybody bad, just horrendous kind of stuff. And then when you see the emergence of a leadership coming from this morass of oppression and exploitation, see this leadership comes, you see this at vanguard, the spirit to lead the people, then what happens is that the bourgeoisie, the rulers, the state, the colonial state then attacks that leadership. And so you don't see the same kind of oppression coming mass of people. In fact, the state will try to win masses of people of the oppressed to unite with it to attack the leadership, the advanced detachment, the vanguard. So the vanguard is that which shows the way, which forges the way, which assumes responsibility for leadership. And in every society, we call it the advanced detachment. We call it that advanced detachment, that detachment that goes out before. And so in that regard, it's a kind of military term. and it's not something that we reject. In terms of what might be called a rear guard, that's an interesting kind of question. And I don't know if we should say what the rear guard is. That's an interesting question. But for us, the vanguard is the critical issue. And yes, there is a rear guard. And if you look closely, you might even see it. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Again, that was from Comrade Moti.
Casanova.
Casanova, yep. Uhuru. So our next question, and we're coming down close to time, comes from Life Malcolm on YouTube. Asks, how do we reach and mobilize the lumpen? Is it time?
Well, I mean, I think that's, here's, when Comrade Life mentions lumpen, it's a term that, sort of comes from kind of a Marxist assumption about there being a sector of the proletariat or the working class, or a sector that has been, that's not proper working class. It's called a lumpen. It means just what it sounds like, a lump. I mean, it's this group of people, and generally speaking, they're characterized as parasites in society. And the thing about the so-called lumpen, although Frantz Fanon, gave them special significance, as did the Black Panther Party, called the lumpen proletariat like the critical force. And I think that was an error, because I think that what this term lumpen sprang from is a European-based reality, social reality, that we saw with the emergence of capitalism, what have you, the whole sectors of the European population that were pushed out of regular society, and sometimes live in communities of their own, and what have you. And the thing about the lumpen is that they're great street fighters. When the stuff hits the fan, that's who you're gonna see in the streets, with the bricks and stuff like that. But they're also an unstable social force, and they are also vulnerable to intrigues and FBI and CIA and intelligence manipulation, utilization. I mean, if you go, when you say lumpen, they're talking about often like people like pimps and prostitutes and gamblers and people who live on the fringes of the underbelly of the society. If like in any of these also oppressed sectors of our community, you see these guys with their heads in the police cars, and the police rely on them as informants and stuff like that to attack our people, because they don't have the long view, generally speaking. But I don't think we can accept just the traditional definition of the lumpen. I think that that sector of our population who are unemployed workers, because you're talking about somebody who functions inside, exists inside of our own social system. This is a situation where a society has been organized on top of our existence. That they live off our, they're the ones who determine whether you have a job or not. This is a foreign alien entity that says whether you can have a job or what you're gonna do. But what you will find that's distinct about what is characterized by the lumpen in our community, we go to the same churches, more or less. I mean, we go to the same clubs when we go to the clubs. We are different in that way. I don't think you can hold that. And I think to submit to the definition of the lumpen is to abdicate our responsibility, Comrade Life, to raise up that sector of the population to their full height as African working class, who don't have a job, who haven't had a job, who've been put on welfare if they're lucky, and who've got some other kind of ways and have to hustle in order to exist. And that's every place I look in the African world, whether it's on the streets of Ghana, whether it's on the streets of the Fifth Ward in Houston, Texas, people having to hustle in order to have an existence. So sometimes they call them, what kind of economy? They call it some kind of, they call them unofficial sectors of the economy and stuff like that. This is what we can characterize as lumpen. And what we say is that we have a responsibility as the vanguard to raise up this sector of the population to their full stature as African workers, and not to submit to that. For example, you used to see the Black Panther Party, they would have as part of the rules of discipline, I shall not, you can't get drunk while on duty, you can't use drugs while on duty. It doesn't require anything about them standing up to full stature all the time. It's not a matter of getting drunk on duty. It's not a matter of using drugs on duty. The fact is the working class has to be able to stand up, and that's our responsibility, to raise the working class to its full stature. So that's what I'm saying, Comrade Life. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to organize, to do political education, to organize in the most oppressed sectors of the population, where this sector that's characterized as lumpen is often located. And we do that, I think, relatively effective and relatively so in places where we do political work. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much. So we have about 5 minutes left, Chairman. We do have lots more questions that have come in, but well, yeah, I just wanted to know if you wanted to, we'll have to deal with those questions next week in the beginning of next week's study. So I just wanted to give you this opportunity to make any closing remarks before we get into our announcements.
Thank you, Comrade. I know you're going to announce this anyway, but I really want to call on all of you, especially, but not exclusively, members of the party and the Uhuru movement. On November 7th and 8th, one of the most important events that's going to happen in this period will occur under the leadership of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. There's going to be on the 7th a rally at Malcolm X Park and a march on the White House, and then another rally across the street from the White House at Lafayette Park. And then on the next day, Sunday, there's going to be a conference that will last all day. I want you to come and spend all the time there. I want you to mobilize everybody you can mobilize. Because part of what this is about is extending revolutionary analysis, a political line to the spontaneous struggles that people are involved in or want to be involved in. This is a really interesting, important moment where many people feel trapped in their houses because of COVID-19, trapped because they feel like there's no alternative to voting for either Biden or Trump, and that's neither of these is something that people are looking at with any good expectations. And we're saying that and trapped with directionless. We see all of these actions happen, but to what end? There is no to what end. And so we say that this mobilization by the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, which our party played a major role in creating, in organizing, and working for. We spent treasure, that is resources, and put bodies to make this coalition work. And it's happening under the slogan of Black Power Matters. Black Power Matters, down with colonialism, Black community control of the police. This is what we are saying, that we want to win. And we want you to come, because I know you're tired of just the directionless kinds of actions and mobilization. I know you've been out to so many. We have too that don't seem to be going anywhere. After you have the demonstration, then what? And we know that this good chance that this election is not going to be resolved by the 7th when we go out. There's a good chance that all kinds of problems, they talk about violence that's happening, may be happening in the streets. Where do our people get leadership from? And we think that these slogans and this mobilization coming together shows an independent activity by African people, regardless of what you plan to do on November 3rd, regardless of whom and whether you voted or not, to come out with other Africans under the slogan, Black Power Matters. It's a profound statement. Black Power Matters, down with colonialism. And we're taking our revolution, our movement back. And then Black community control of the police. That informs us. And so you can take a petition from the coalition and Black community control of the police working group and work that. Or you can go and organize in your community under however you plan to do that. For Black community control of the police. This is where we are going. Fight against colonialism, fight for Black power, fight for Black community control of the police, and come out on November 7th, Washington, D.C. We're going to have an extraordinary mobilization at Malcolm X Park. That's going to start at noon. And then on November 8th, we're going to have a Zoom conference that will go on for the entire day, exploring all these questions around colonialism, that we are talking about today. So I want to thank you very much, Comrade Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman. And I just really do want to salute our leadership, Chairman Maya Shatella, for this incredible study that happened today. And just want to recognize that people did ask questions, and because of time, we want you to know that the chairman will see your question and we will deal with it in the first half of the Q&A period next Sunday. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your revolutionary news and analysis, visit theburningspear.com. For revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All of the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, to fill out our contact form. Order your copy of Chairman Amalia Shatella's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, available at burningspearmarketplace.com. Today at 4 p.m. Eastern, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is hosting a special event entitled "The Revolution Will Not Be White-Led," a call to white people to join under the leadership of the African Revolution. Held just a day after the historic March for Reparations swept through the 6 states across the U.S., the event will feature keynote presentations by Chairman Amalia Shatella and African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess. You can watch on Uhuru Solidarity's Facebook or YouTube channel, or you can participate via Zoom by registering at tinyurl.com/Uhuru Solidarity. That's today at 4 p.m. Eastern. Saturday, October 24th, the 9th annual Uhuru Virtual Health Festival is taking place, putting the power of African health in African hands. Join us for live music, speakers, mental health panels, fitness demonstrations, African dance, and more. Free virtual event for all ages. You can register via Zoom at tinyurl.com/Uhuru Health Fest. Every Tuesday from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Ralph Pointer is a member of the Black is Back Coalition and chairs the Political Prisoner Working Group. He is a longtime freedom fighter and leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. To tune in via phone, call 347-857-3293. You can listen on the computer at Blog Talk Radio, Human Rights Demands. And as mentioned, on November 7th and 8th, the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations hosts its annual Black People's March on the White House, themed Black Power Matters, Down with Colonialism, Black Community Control of the Police. Plan to attend and register today at blackisbackcoalition.org. And we're calling on people to follow the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook, or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus, COVID-19. AppDub has recently launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Every Wednesday, you can catch Chairman Amalia Shatella with the address to the African nation at 3 p.m. Eastern, going live from the Burning Spear TV on YouTube and Chairman Amalia Shatella's Facebook page. It's another opportunity for great African internationalist analysis regarding topical events, anything from, we've been dealing with the elections over this current period. And again, that is 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman's Facebook like page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube page, the address to the African nation. Lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit the burningspears.com events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.